Okay, so I'm going to start with a brief introduction before Jaime gets into his talk. Welcome, everybody, to the Maya Living Legacy lecture series. I'm just going to briefly thank all the units that have sponsored these talks. They include language sciences, in addition to the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, LASIS, Plant and Agro Ecosystem Sciences, Science and Technology Studies, Spanish and Portuguese, Education Policy Studies, and Anthropology. All those units have helped make all of these great talks possible. You can check out all of those on the YouTube channel that I've pasted in the chat, and Jaime's talk will be on that channel as well. It's a great honor to introduce Jaime Pérez González. He obtained his PhD in 2021 from UT Austin, from the Department of Linguistics, and he's currently an assistant professor in the linguistics department at UC Santa Barbara. Jaime's work, it includes both analyses of the grammatical properties of Mayan languages and other indigenous language families, in addition to methods and the ethics of community involvement in language documentation and revitalization projects. And Jaime has really been a key figure in the Mayan languages and linguistics community because of his sustained work on the critically endangered language Mocho, which we'll hear a lot about today. So I don't want to keep talking and take time away from Jaime. So please join me in welcoming Jaime. Thanks so much for being here with us, and we really look forward to this talk. I'm going to unshare the poster, and then we can get right into it.
Yes. Thank you, Grant, for that kind presentation introduction. And yeah, I will share today part of what we have done with the mature communities. And I say communities because Mocho, as we will see, is spoken in or was still spoken in two different places in South Mexico. But I'll give you more context in a minute. But thank you again. I just named some of these departments here, but Grant already mentioned them, and thank you for making this talk possible and for yeah, contributing to the understanding of Mayan culture, history, and languages. All right, so the topic for today, I suggested a titles, like tentative title, but let's say we can really learn something from this project. That we're gonna be basically touching bases on what we have done and how we have been doing this along with the community and see what we can come up at the end, learning from what's been said about language documentation in general and what we have done in our experience with these communities. All right, so I wanna start by thanking these speakers of this language. Awak ani khungange tunta khunange nana taktela tish wanga blel motosintla en bahlak awak ani ke cho toe awak akhinke I awit bal ti wet. I just said in Mocho that thank you very much to every one of my uncles and aunts from the Mocho community who have shared their knowledge and their language with me. All right, and I also want to thank my people who I've learned also from them, and especially my grandparents from my dad's side who are Tzeltal. I am a Tzeltal mestizo myself, which means that I am Tzeltal from one side and non-Tzeltal from the other side. But I want to thank them because I originally started working in linguistics, working with them, asking them questions, and I have been their interpreters my entire life until their last day here on this what we know as Earth. So yes, I've learned a lot about them and how to actually be more sensitive about communities and languages in general, and of course about our experience also sharing these two different worlds between Mayan and non-Mayan world. So that for that I thank them also a lot. And what I'm gonna be sharing today is this is kind of like a rough outline. I'm gonna give you an introduction about what language documentation is and why this is important, and what we I'm gonna talk briefly about Mocho language, and then our project we're gonna focus more on. And this is basically the Mocho language documentation project. And then I will say something that we have learned, some things that we have learned from this project, and then I'll give you some conclusions at the end. All right, let's jump to the introduction. Why documenting a language? As or maybe some of you already know, there are around 6,000 to 7,000 languages, depending on whose classification you follow. And also, there are around more than 200 sign languages, again, or maybe more, depending on whose classification you're following. And then the important thing here is that 50 of these languages, of the 7,000 languages, are spoken by half of the population of the world, which means 6,950 languages are spoken by the other half, which means we get like one speaker and a half of the rest of the languages, whereas you get like 120 average of the other major languages in the world. So that's again a critical situation because many of these languages are actually disappearing, or let's say some of them are going dormant, or and we know nothing about some of them. So the importance of documenting these languages comes with the importance of the scientific work that we can contribute to in this world that we call linguistics. And here, basically, what I'm going to be talking about is documenting and language documentation, which is a subfield of linguistics. And what is language documentation? Language documentation, as Tony Woodbury says, is the creation, annotation, preservation, and dissemination of transparent records of a language. Here for this talk, I will not be talking about creation, annotation, or preservation, but I'll focus more on the dissemination part. And in the creation and then the dissemination part mostly. If you have any question about annotation and preservation, please ask me in the Q&A session, and I'd be happy to talk about that as well. And why is that I'm going to talk about creation and dissemination? Because when you think about the project design, it's important to know what actually you are going to create, right? And of course, it's not always, hand in hand, but we try at least to, or we suggest that we try to be a broad, like a general view of the language so we can capture most of its structure. And why is this important? Because languages are spoken by people, right? And people are immersed in a community, and the community has their own way of existing in the world. So they have culture, right? Therefore, the language is used in a context where people use it in every day, so that it can have different possible functions, or let's say the structures can vary depending on what you are actually communicating. In that way, if we understand the language from the context where it is spoken, then we can understand how this language is structured in the abstract level, which is called in linguistics language description or descriptive linguistics as another subfield of linguistics. And the goal here is, again, as I said, understand the rules of these abstract structures that we will learn when we are in an immersed context, or we learn any language as a child. We get those structures without thinking, that this is the right structure, and this is this is a noun phrase, or this is a verb. We only absorb the language, and we kind of get the language automatically, and in a non-aware situation, right? Of without this um, without these prejudices of following correct rules or incorrect rules. Well, I mean, nobody follows incorrect rules, right? We kind of avoid them unless you are a poet or a writer. Um, And then what do we do as language documentarists or in language documentation? Well, again, we collect data. We try to collect data from different genres, from different contexts, and then we do descriptive linguistics. And from that descriptive work, then we can theorize the rules or the abstraction of the language. And of course, there are other components, and then we can work on language revitalization, language reclamation, and among many other things. These are just few that I name. Um, Here's the thing. When when we do a language documentation project design, there are also goals that we follow depending on the institution that we are getting funds from. That is important. Okay. And I'll mention this because it is important to one of these projects that I had uh, when I started doing this work. Okay. And then can we do it all? It is difficult sometimes, right? Especially if you are a student, if you are a grad student, that you are working on a language documentation project, and then you have to do your dissertation, or let's say MA thesis or PhD dissertation, because you have a time constraint, right? You cannot work on it all because there are so many things that you need to do. And if you have a language documentation project, might not actually capture all of this information, but at least we try to do our best, right? Or that should be the goal. And then one of the things that it's been said about what people suggest or what people have said about the language documentation project and the outcomes that come from these projects are not useful or not very useful for language learning processes or revitalization purposes. And here we'll talk a bit about that and why I consider these suggestions at the end. Here I'm saying that language documentation should be very useful for language revitalization purposes, which is different to what is descriptive linguistics. Maybe descriptive linguistics will not capture the whole overview of what we are documenting, but at least say, okay, here is what I can contribute to, right? And then if there is something that I don't understand, well, that's why you have an entire life if you want to still understand that. And we have examples of that in linguistics, right? And then one thing that I suggest is that language immersion work in community-based work in language documentation processes is actually very helpful to understand not just the structure, but the language itself. And we'll talk a bit about how this actually reflects in Mocho. All right, an overview, a very brief overview. Just sorry, Grant, how many minutes I have for the entire talk, just to make sure I don't go over time?
Uh, about 45.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so Mayan languages, again, there are around 29, 31 Mayan languages, depending on whose classification you're following, right? And the language that we'll focus today is from this Anghobalan branch, which is called Motocintleco or Tuzanteco traditionally, or Mocho as a single language. But it was actually it was until recent that we have actually recognized Motocintleco and Tuzantec as belonging to a single language. Okay, because people have thought that they were two different languages, and I'll talk a bit more about that when I get to what we've done. And here is the Mayan word, right? So the Mayan languages were spoken and are still spoken in what we know now as Mesoamerica, right? From middle part of Mesoamerica until like the last bit of Mesoamerica. Well, not the last bit, but in Salvador and Honduras. And this map here that you see, the little map there, it's the Americas, right? And you can see where this Mayan word was located in the ancient world and now still in most of this part. And now here, okay, so it's if you saw the map here, and if you don't know about, borders, well, this is actually the border between Guatemala and Mexico, as you can see here in the little map on your right, at the bottom. That's Mexico, and then the border, the Chiapas, the state of Chiapas, is that little one in yellow, and in the big one in the map that's bigger, you see that in red, and that is called Municipio Mocho, because again, it's usually uh, people think that Mocho is only spoken in Motocintla, right? But again, we'll see why it is not true. And as I said, there are two varieties of Mocho. And Mocho is again taken as a single language, and the census, the national census in Mexico in 2020 said that there were still 124 speakers of Mocho, which is wrong because Don Teodoso and I speakers of Mocho, we had our own like census and went house by house in Motocintla, and there were only around 46 speakers. And then in other communities, there were around 4 or 5 speakers in Belisario and other small towns around Motocintla. So there were not more than 50 speakers. And to Santan, there were 4 speakers who I worked with, and all of them, of course, know each other because there are only 4. And then the updated numbers that we have, but this is just a number that we have been sharing with Don Teodoso, who is a native from Motocintla, is that there are around 35 speakers left because with COVID-19, some of them were also gone, and of course, all of them are elders, and that's the natural course of life. So, and there are 2 remaining speakers in Tusantan. Okay, and these are the places where these languages are spoken, right on the border between Guatemala and Mexico. Now, this is Motocintla, as you can see in a picture, and if you go farther, you can see that down there is nestled in between the hills. And I have to say that also there was like a flood that damaged a lot of the Mocho speakers' houses in some years ago in the 1994, if I'm not wrong. And anyways, that made like the 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 people who were living in sort of like the outskirts of this little town of Motocintla were removed to like the outskirts or far away from this place. So basically, they don't live in a community as we understand community. They live far away from each other now. This is Tusantan. Tusantan is not a community like where houses are like, I mean, there's like a downtown, if we want to call it, but then again, like the rest of the speakers are just outside of the main or the town, what we call downtown. And Okay, so that's kind of where we are located. And now what is that we do in terms of language documentation project? Well, this language documentation officially started as in 2018. And this is the title, the official title that I suggested for the language, the endangered language documentation program that was hosted before at the University of London, and now it's in Germany. But again, here is the website, and you can go and check like for more information. But originally this project started while I was again like in 2018. I was still a PhD student, but before then it actually started before with other fellowships grants for summer field work. And those 2 that were very important at the beginning of this project was Joel Scherzer and E.D. Farmer Fellowship. Uh, these grants, again, Joel Scherzer was kind of like the grant that allowed me to go and explore the area without really giving, back any documentation itself. It was just to get to know the area. I mean, I am from Chiapas myself, but I have had never been in the community in that area. So that was kind of an exploratory trip, and that helped me, of course, to get to meet the people. the ED Farmer fellowships that I got for 3 years helped me get started this language documentation project, and it basically helped me to again like explore the first fellowship. I explored just the Motocintla area, and then for with the ED Farmer, um I went also to Santan, and again I went house by house to find speakers of Tusanteco. And then Carlos Smith Fellowship that I got also in 2018 before COVID helped me to understand the tense aspect of this language. And then, of course, this 3 year of language documentation project that helped me really think about this language documentation itself. So what do we do? Uh, what I started with here is to okay, there is a lot of historical damage that has happened in these communities. I say has happened, but it has an agentive character that we can call the national or the state nation between Guatemala and Mexico. This part of what we saw as the state of Chiapas was actually part of Guatemala before when these nations were created. Chiapas belonged to Guatemala, and there in after the independence in 1824, Chiapas started a plebiscite because they wanted to belong. They wanted to annex themselves to Mexico because the Guatemalan government were not really taking care of this area. So and it was in a constant fight between Mexico and Guatemala. And then the plebiscite actually most of the votes were towards Mexico, and that's why they actually moved as part of the Mexican nation. However, all these borders that you saw or across all these borders, there were many languages spoken, and some of them are gone. And you ask why? Well, when Chiapas, the state, became part of Mexico, there were local rules, and one of the local rules, for example, in Motocintla in 1888, around 1888, sorry, was that people or the local government prohibited any indigenous language. So people were punished, people were incarcerated, people were hit, many things that happened, so that people actually stopped teaching their language or speaking their language with their children. And these people that I will show in a bit are people that learned their language with their grandparents, like behind the scene, or people that went actually to work to the coffee plantations where these big farms outside of Motocintla in other places. And Tusantan was next to Tusantan, there was a big farm, coffee plantation farm, where many of these people actually traveled to and worked. So many of these people, or if not all, except two, did not actually go to school, and that's why they kept the language. But the rest who stayed in these communities were they lost their language. Okay, and so all of these happened in just less than a century, and that's why Mocho, I mean, historically, Mocho has been a small language, not like we cannot compare this, with Celtal or Yucatec Mayan, which are the most spoken languages in Mexico. Yucatan with around a million of speakers, and Celtal with, more than 7,000 speakers. But Mocho has been always known as a small language. But again, like this historical, event caused them to lose many speakers. Okay, so the first year, I don't have pictures of my first trip here, but my first trip, I'm gonna start with that. Um, I talked to some of these people that you saw in at the beginning of the picture that I showed. And many of these people, or some of these people, and some that I have no pictures from, of basically did not want to work with me. And why is that they did not want to work? Because again, I was trained, I have to say this, I was trained in linguistics or in a department of linguistics that as a linguist, I had to be a linguist in the field and just be a linguist, right? And that did not work out for me for my first trip here in Motocintla. And why? Um, when I got to meet, for example, Don Flaviano, this guy here that you see here, was the last shaman, or the one that performed and know, the how to. He was a shaman, so he knew how to cure and do the traditional ritual speech in Mocho. He was the last one. He passed away last year in November last year. But when I got there for the first time, he was very reluctant to work with me, and he did not accept to share any work or not even teach me the language. And I kind of just did not understand why, and I didn't ask either, and I didn't get there to to be more like a conversational person. I just got there as a linguist asking for, how to learn Mocho, or how if you could teach me Mocho and things like that. And but this is the first person I met, and then I went to different people, and the same thing happened, except for two people who actually welcomed me in their houses. The rest was rejected me. They basically rejected me, and they said, "Okay, we're not going to work with you, and we're not going to share our language with you." And then I just kind of got pissed at the end, right? And I went back to UT Austin. I say, why do I want to work on this language? If people, don't want to do anything in their language, why do I care? If they don't care, well, I don't have to. And then I had a project that was on Celtal about, semantics, syntax and semantics. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I knew Celtal, so I didn't need to do or, go and do language documentation because I could just do it by myself. I'm a speaker, so, but anyways, the person that I also shared at the beginning of my screen in my first slide, I'm going to go back to that so you guys can follow, was the person who encouraged me to work on this language and to get these grants that I shared with you as well, and to go back and see why people actually did not want to work with them, And this person here that you see on the corner on your right side on the bottom, who is Nora England, and she was very encouraging, and she was like, we don't know anything about that language, so if you can describe it, because here's the thing, I started to work on this language for a class that I took in my first semester, which was typology. For this class, we had to pick a language. And I picked first, I picked an Amazonian language. The idea was that I wanted to do a language documentation project in that Amazonian language. But then I kind of decided that it was a bit more difficult, so I said, okay, I'm going to pick another language. So I changed to Mocho. And then I saw that Mocho had very interesting features that we hadn't actually described in, let's say, compared to other Mayan languages. So I was like, oh, this is actually very interesting. I was all the time kind of like sharing it with Nora, and Nora was like, why don't you go back? And I was like, I don't want to go back. And then, next week I would just like be, oh, that Mocho that's has this feature. I just saw this, I heard this, and she was like, okay, Jaime, I think you want to work on Mocho. Why don't you go back and apply for this grant and go back, please? Just stop saying it that Mocho has many interesting features, because I wanted to publish a paper also. And then she was like, you cannot publish anything if you haven't really tested it, and there are still speakers alive, so just respect them and go and test your hypotheses. And I was like, okay, that's true. And then that's kind of how it started. And then at the end, of course, my project for my dissertation completely changed to to Mocho project, because I had a project on Celtal, and then of course I started from scratch doing all the revisiting, morphological features to get to the syntax. So, and it was true. Like I couldn't get to syntax if I didn't know about the morphology of the language. So I kind of went back and then I kind of went back and then I said, okay, maybe it's true that we need to work more on this language. So that's when everything started, and then I'm gonna share my screen again. Um, and here is how actually okay, so the first trip that I had wasn't really successful. So the second trip that I did, I was more sensitive to what was happening because again, part of my first trip, I learned like with talking to these other people that welcomed me to their houses, they explained why these people actually in their like understanding was that they had an agreement of not sharing their language. And there were many reasons, but one of the reasons was this that they were like kind of still having some historical traumas, but also because there were also researchers before me that kind of promised them different things. I'm not just talking about linguists here. I'm talking about, sociologists, anthropologists who came to town and promised them things and they didn't do anything at the end. So they were kind of, having their reasons and I kind of understood that. And then when I went back, I had a totally different approach, which was more like, hey, let's talk about, whatever, what you do and, what is that you do with your language or do you still speak it, not being a linguist. It was more like a person who wanted to hear their stories, without recording anything. So it took me like 2 years to really start this project. And one of the things that actually helped to share this or to share my interest is that uh, here in Motocintla, again, like this historical process is anywhere, but here in this part of Mexico was really very, the process of avoiding indigenous languages was stronger than other parts of Mexico. And to let's say to cure or to start the process of healing in this community in Motocintla, we had the idea, a great idea, thanks to also Kiel, a German guy who also works on, well, he works on different things, environmental stuff, that we kind of talked about what can we do about this. So, and we had this idea about summer camp to bring people in the community who would be interested in culture and language, in Mocho language, culture and language. And it was very successful. We had gringos coming to town. We had, people from different parts of Mexico, and that helped a lot to see why is that we care about this language. Why is that this language is important? And at the end of this summer camp, we had a public event where we shared plays, where we shared, these children learning how to sing in Mocho and so on. I mean, again, this was just a week that we did this summer camp, but it helped a lot to really engage these people who were descendants of Mocho to try also to work towards language preservation and cultural preservation. And then again, like the third year of this, that's kind of when we really started all this project. And then of course we kind of started, we throughout these 2 years we talked about, why this is important, why we need, to understand the language because, the diversity, anything that, was really important to recognize. And then we started this project with, the help of many of these people, and they allowed us to go and document, food elaboration, traditional food, and different festivities, and of course narrative elicitation, any sort of narratives that we got from different topics, conversations, not just, narratives or elicitations. And this is also one of the things that I learned a lot from ritual speech. And if you see, this is me actually performing, not performing, I wasn't performing. I do believe in these rituals. So when I asked Don Flaviano that if he knew about, how to cure in his language. He said, I used to do it when I was younger, but I stopped doing it because my dad told me that if I still do it in Mocho, I couldn't survive because not people would like to be cured in Mocho, speaking Mocho, because they said that Mocho was like the evil's language. So I had to switch completely to Spanish so I could have clients. And I said, okay, no, but do you still remember how to actually do it? And he said, yes, but nobody wants to be cured in, speaking Mocho. And I was like, I want to do that. I believe on that. So I can be the person. And he said, well, if you're willing, then yeah, we can do it. And he started again. He did that for the first time again, like back after many years. Uh, and it was interesting because after that, let's say performance, if you want to call it performance, he started to do it again in Mocho with everyone that he had as a client. And it was actually very happy. I didn't know this. I learned this a year after that he was doing this after I left because again, I used to go like every year. So I went back the next year and he said, okay, I'm doing it, every time I have a client, I'm doing it in Mocho. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I didn't tell him to do it. With his clients. I told him to do it with me. But again, he started doing it with everyone. And I just thought, oh, this is awesome. And then, of course, we also had fun. We talk about, different things. We sing, this day with, this Doña Felipa on the picture on your left side. They both like to sing, and I didn't know that. And they were like, "Why don't we sing?" And I was like, "Okay, but I have no equipment to record this." And he was like, "Oh, don't worry about recording it. We're just gonna have fun." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And we had fun, and having fun is kind of like actually the warming up for to have a um a more productive language documentation maybe in the next day. And then this is the people that I met, while I was doing language documentation in Tucson. And again, like these people that you see in the picture are gone. And these elders are gone. And here, this is the one. Yeah, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Sorry about that. But he's gone now. And then Don Julio is the one who is still alive and he can work. And then there is another speaker who is not able to speak. And then there is this person here on your left who is a semi-speaker who knows some phrases, some words, but he's not really a fluent speaker. And what do? We teach, we learn the language, right, together. And Don Teodoso here that you see has been very crucial to this project. And he's now one thing that I'm also happy to share. He's now actually the instructor of the language in a more official project that we have in the community in Motocinta. And he's also teaching it with children in an official school. And this is a workshop on Tusantan, creating the alphabet, but also in a more unofficial context with descendants of the speakers. And of course, we train students to do this, work, and that we have more people. And one of the things that I want to share also is that, the things that how you design how your project will actually be the crucial component of your project because dissemination, as suggested in most of these language documentation descriptions, comes at the end. However, what I've done in this language documentation is that we do have a language documentation project design that starts with dissemination, the opposite, because we learn and we teach, right? And that's actually something that has been crucial. And then, of course, we have the preservation component. So what have we learned about this project? I'm going to be brief here. I'm actually running over time, but ask people what they want to do. That is very important. How do they want to do it? And what is that they want to, be seeing in these recordings? And this will again like help people to engage and send their kids to these projects that come, these outcomes that come after or along the project. And here again, these are people who are learning the language with Don Teodoso, and there are more than 100 children now, so not just those. And then again, like work with the speaker and teach the speaker, what you are understanding about their language. It's not just you as a linguist learning the language, but at the same time, teach them how, why is that this is important. And I was actually here, we were working on tense aspect in this language and, kind of sharing it with Don Teodoso because he is the one who is teaching the language there, not me. Okay, so that's why it is very important. From the scientific component, this is again one thing that is very common in linguistics. I'm going to share just one thing that we have learned from this project. But again, there is a class of words that we call affective or well known as affective words in Mayan linguistics, and these are also some in some languages the equivalent of what we call idophones. Okay, idophones are these words that are used like onomatopoeic words if you in English that kind of relates to sound, but not just sound. They actually have a more broader like semantic scope. And here, if we look at what we have, or the descriptive work that we have previous to my work, there are these three main, let's say, books descriptions. And one of the things is that we have this norma de escritura de la lengua Mocho, which is kind of like giving you the rules of how to write and speak the language. And then we have this Itzbal Chutz Iba Wetol Didactica, which is a pedagogical grammar of how to teach Mocho. And then there is the first preliminary Mocho dictionary from Terence Kaufman from the 60s. And these two other documents are from 2012 and 2012, I think both of them. In any case, 13, the didactica. If we look at the work classes that they mention, all of these work that we have, all of them mention nouns, adjectives, number, positionals, transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, adverbs, and directionals, right? This is very common in Mayan linguistics, but we don't see any affective work as or any mention of these work classes, and I wonder why. So the question is, I mean, if we look at this descriptive work, we say, okay, there is no idophones in Mocho, right? Not they are affective words. But if we look at let's say the narratives, we got this very, very rich production of them. And let's just hear this. I'm gonna go quickly here. Yan, la teni kimukon at siya pero college kushokin henini. That's que bueno. La kimukon at siya. Okay, so we see the cos, right? And here, I'm just sorry. And here, do these words exist? Yes. I mean, in a descriptive work that Laura Martin did in 1994, she mentions cos when she's describing the narrative structure as an onomatopoeic imitation, right? But then are they just sound imitation? They are not. If we look at the lexicography of what's been done, we see that these are actually words that are not mentioned. But if we see the use of this cos root in the text, we see that here we have chkosuin, right? We have a morphology that's added to it. And then we see that also there is other morpheme that is added to it, which is ulah, right? So it's productive. There is morphology attached to it. So we ask the question, is this morphology proper to this word class, or is it a morphology that is used with other word classes? Well, the thing is that we will look at what's being said in many languages, in the Mayan languages, we have a suffix, and it's not just in Mocho. There is a suffix here that's being described for the Mayan hieroglyphics. That's ulah or lah, which is the remnants of what we see in Mocho ulah. Okay, so there is an affective suffix that we need to describe in this language. And here in my work, I kind of started to work on that. And I'm going to skip these examples, but believe me, these are parts of what we see. So looking at text and seeing what people are actually using in real world, they exist, right? And here is basically just some of the conclusions. I mean, this is taken from Adrian's Sikewa, who said, that in field methods in linguistics in a classroom is still, rooted in colonization, let's say, protocols, which means that you come as a foreigner to teach them what you know from your training. But again, that's not how it should work. It should work from the other side around. You get there, you know about linguistics, right? But you don't fit the data to the theory. Sorry, the theory to the language. You do the opposite. And then again, like recognizing people's need and indigenous epistemologies, I think it's very important. And now, once you are in the field, again, be sensitive to all of these things that I kind of mentioned, and then be more inclusive in your project design. Uh, Again, as I said, stop doing, bringing Latin to your indigenous structure, because until now, that's kind of what we start still doing in some ways, and we kind of just try to describe at least the language from its own and see what pops up or what is interesting, different to what we have. And it is important for many things, not just the linguistic structure itself, but also the culture and why these words are actually used in these languages. And yeah, that's kind of how I want to end this. I went over a bit, I guess, but
Oh
thank you.
no, that's great. It was great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Jaime.
Yeah,
So
you're
we have time for any questions or comments anybody might have. So feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. While we're waiting, I just wanted to say I really appreciate your description of sort of the experience from the beginning to now and how it's not always easy to go into a community and sometimes being persistent and sort of thinking about how you've been trained and how it might not be well received is just something that one has to do. Um, I really appreciated you describing that. Um, the question I had was about you mentioned when the training of students and these techniques and documentation and are these like young people that live in the communities that are just interested in joining the project and I kind of always have felt that they're like a key element in the whole since they're kind of at an age where they might start like distancing themselves from the language and culture. And these types of projects can show them how useful it is to be able to document things that they know already and sort of make them aware that that knowledge is valuable. I just wanted to was just interested in their role in the project.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for your words. And here, yeah, again, like um I think one of the things that happens when you get to the field is or to the community that you want to work on is, again, if you're a student, you might just think about the time constraint you have, and you might just, want to get, the data and basically leave. And that's kind of what we have done traditionally in linguistics, right? But again, like my process I think was different because yes, I was kind of persistent. I was stubborn. I am a stubborn person myself, but I think also the encouragement of Nora was crucial to this, because if I hadn't had Nora, in my process of being a PhD student, I just had, maybe I don't know, I just maybe could have done Celtal and without really aware of this situation. But also I have to say, Don Teodoso, who the person who was, who's the instructor of this language now, uh, he is he was also like crucial to this decision because after I left the community, he kind of kept in touch and uh being interested in these little things that he didn't go to school. He was one of these people who were taken to the farms, the coffee plantations. So he basically grew up outside of Motocintla, and he came back when he was, at the age of getting a wife. So he started to learn Spanish. I mean, when he was, in his 16s or something, uh, and he did not how to read and write. And he started to do it when he was an adult. And then when I got there, he didn't know how to read and write in Mocho. And he was so interested that he wanted to learn and write in his language. And, he kind of kept in touch, asking me these questions about, how do I represent this sound? How do I write this down? And then I was like, okay, if there is, a person there that is interested, I want to contribute to that, at least teach him how to write and teach and read in their own language. And then I went back, and that's kind of how we started all this project. I didn't mention that, but he was also one of the things. And a lot of the things that he told me during, these 2 years was hitting, on my experience being also an indigenous person and how I survived through, these elementary school, high school. My experiences going through this helped me also understand them a lot. So I think that was very important in this process. And maybe I didn't care about academics too much. I cared more about, the social component because I knew, all these things that happens in these situations, and I wanted to also help them maybe try to understand why their language and their culture was important because I had that privilege. And against anything that I had gone through, I still kept that, and I wanted also them to be more, aware of the situation that people face in these kind of situations and how we can actually overcome these situations, being proud of who we are. Anyways, I think that's a social component that really helped me. And how you actually engage these people to this project is again like I mean for the first and second year we didn't have any success until we had this camp. The second trip was the camp, and the camp was actually the let's say the part that helped more people to understand why this is important, and from that project they people or speakers of Mocho encourage their children or their grandchildren, to go to teach, sorry, to learn from our project or to learn Mocho. Because every time that I go to Motocintla, we do like a very informal workshop with Don Teodoso where basically people come. And that picture that I showed where they are actually dressing their native clothes, that picture was just a performance of them so I could see that they are proud of who they are. And I felt bad of that because again, like I'm not asking them to do that. I'm just, sharing my experience of, these processes with them. But it was to that point of, where they were like, oh, we are actually very happy about what we have learned and what we know now that we want to share with you. And they were singing the national Mexican hymn. How do you pronounce that word? The himno nacional mexicano.
Anthem. Uh-huh.
Anthem, yes.
Yeah.
So yes, it was,
Hmm.
and I was very happy to see that because again, that's something that they did with Don Teodoso without any help from my side. So again, these kind of things say a lot about what they do, but also the figure that you are for them in the community. I think that's not a good thing in like many ways because you have to give them, the agentivity of doing these kind of things. And Don Teodoso have done that, but again, like I'm not a politician or I'm not like, I don't want to be a figure that, they want to follow because I just, kind of share my story. But anyway, so I think this is very difficult, but then again, this helped to engage more people. And in that year, we were training people on the Tuzantec area, and many people came to our workshop. Like these students, they were students actually at different universities in Chiapas, not in Tuzantan, like from far away, from Comitán and from San Cristobal, who came and said, "We want to help you. We want to, try to contribute to this project." And they were working with me, learning how to transcribe Mocho, learning the language and how to transcribe it, and also understanding and talking to people. And again, like this is a project that we had done like collaboratively with people. So every time I could not go, they would just actually go and do the any activity that we had planned. And like for the International Mother Tongue Day, for example, I cannot travel from California to Chiapas just to to give a talk or something. And if they ask me, I basically say, okay, you can do it, or if any of these students are there, maybe just ask them, and they can just do it with you, right? Along with you. So and now and then we have also some students who are contributing on the Motocintla area. But the thing that happens in Motocintla is that when we have had students from Motocintla that there is no university in Motocintla, or there is no public university. So every time they finish high school, they have to move to different places to if they want to achieve higher education. So they leave, and that's what we have had. So there are still people who are interested and who are learning the language, but they are from a kind of outside. And if the summer allows, to meet or to come together in Motocintla, then we do it. But if not, basically just the people who are able to. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So what are your next steps? What's next for this project? What's coming up?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. And okay, so when I decided to move to Mocho, I
Hmm.
also proposed that I wanted to write a grammar, right? Because there's no grammar of this language. But again, like I started to do this project like late in my PhD program, so I could not finish the grammar. And
Hmm.
I actually started like kind of following up on what I did for my PhD dissertation to develop the whole grammar. And for the postdoc, I was doing it, but I didn't have time to, or I wasn't really I wasn't able to travel to Motocintla or to Santan because of my visa issues. So I basically worked only with data that I had. But this last summer, I went back and basically tried to corroborate some of these and test, constructions that I have for specifically for the syntax chapter, which is something that I didn't really get to do in
Hmm.
for my dissertation and adding other chapters. So that's kind of where we are now, producing a
Hmm.
grammar. But again, this is a collaborative grammar with Don Teodoso. So we are
Hmm.
authors of this grammar because he's not just a passive, collaborator because he teaches me a lot about this structure. So we are kind of doing this together. And of
Hmm.
course, I didn't mention this, but we also have a pedagogical grammar coming up soon, which is in Spanish. Because again, like there is no there is not sense of writing a pedagogical grammar on Mocho only because this language is again like all the younger speakers are learning it as a second language, so we want to give
Hmm.
them tools to do that. And there is also a dictionary that's gonna be in Spanish because Terry's dictionary was in English, most of the
Hmm.
definitions, and the one that we're doing is in Spanish and Mocho. So
Hmm.
that's the things that we hope this year will come up.
Yeah, great. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
want to
And
learn more about Mocho. I think everyone does. It's so good that you've done this work. I think
yes,
it's
and of course
Mhm.
there there is a lot still to do, and yeah, we the idea is that the grammar will clarify many of the things that I said in my
Mhm.
descriptive work in for my PhD. So yeah, hopefully it will come out soon.
Yeah. Okay. So we're a little bit over time, but that's fine. So I guess we'll end it here. Thanks again, Jaime. That was great. This is really, really important work, and I think we're all really, really happy that you started it and continue to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope everyone has a good day and good night, depending on where you are.
All right, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Alison, and thank you,
Yeah,
Grant.
thank you so much, Jaime.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right,
Bye.
bye bye.